Get ready for back to school with H&M. From mix and match basics to new denim styles, find their favorites for in and out of the classroom at your nearest H&M and on hm.com.
Hello and welcome to All Indians Matter. I'm Ashraf Engineer. Estimates of disability in India vary. The last census puts the number of people with disabilities at 21 million or 2% of the population. But a World Bank report in 2009 put it at 55 million to 90 million. Now that's 5% to 8%. While the number may be debatable, what's clear is that persons with disabilities in India have consistently faced marginalization and exclusion in all aspects of life, from education to employment. One of the many ways in which they are further disadvantaged is the lack of accessible public spaces for them. It was in 2016 that India introduced the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, expanding the categories of disabilities from 7 to 21 to include physical, visible, invisible, and cognitive conditions. The objective was to ensure that people with disabilities can live with dignity, without discrimination, and with equal opportunities. So, accessibility must go beyond compliance with the law to encompass qualitative aspects such as functionality and comfort. In India, we have a serious lack of spaces accessible to the disabled. For that to change, the issue must be viewed not just as a legal one, but as a social responsibility.
All Indians matter.
We have on the show Jacob Kurian, trustee and honorary secretary of the Association of People with Disability, or APD. The APD has signed an MOU with the Department for Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities to assess and improve public spaces in terms of accessibility. Jacob is also the driving force behind the Yes to Access project. The Yes to Access app is an accessibility evaluation tool designed to create more inclusive public spaces. It helps assess public spaces and facilities to ensure they meet accessibility standards. In the past, Jacob has had a long career at CXO level positions in Indian and multinational companies. Welcome, Jacob.
Thank you, Ashraf. Happy to be here.
What kind of obstacles do people with disabilities face on a daily basis, and how does all this hold them back? For instance, we know that many buildings don't have ramps.
Yeah, India has no conception of what accessibility really means. I mean, like all things in India, we have great laws. You referred the Rights to Persons with Disability Act, which actually makes it a crime to discriminate against persons with disability. However, most times, the act isn't enforced unless somebody actually makes a legal case out of it. We do have the central government has actually issued harmonized guidelines for building accessibility. There's a code, but 90% of the people don't know about it. Even when it comes to the digital world, increasingly in India, you have to be part of Digital India in some way or the other, whether it's your KYCs or your apps or your, Aadhaar verifications, etc. There are a large number of places where the apps and the websites are not accessible. Even more surprising, because India is such a technology leader and we're probably building apps all over the world for everybody. Most techies are not even aware of the WCAG guidelines on accessibility. So it's a long haul. We are quite a long way away from the standards that are there in more developed countries.
Right. Could you also talk about the psychological impact of being unable to access public spaces?
Let me tell you a little story about, my mother, as she aged, uh, was fiercely independent, lived alone. She had a friend of hers for 30, 35 years who lived across the road from her. And they would, be in and out of each other's houses. Um, she had another circle of friends. But as she got older, I found that she wasn't going out at all. And I would tell her, Amma, you should go out. You should go and meet people, because you know that lonesomeness is one of the biggest handicaps that the elderly face. And it became evident to me that the footpath outside her home was always like a war zone. And she was terrified of falling down. Either one, one agency, the other was always digging it up and then putting it back at us. Then they put a barrier in the middle of the road. So she had to walk the equivalent of 6 blocks, go turn around, and then come back another 6 blocks just to cross the road. Then they cut a little cutaway in the middle of that to allow people to cross. But it required you to balance on a narrow 4-inch band of cement, which obviously no old person with traffic hurtling both ways was going to. So increasingly, she began to get shut in just because the physical environment of her that she was in, not because she was mentally incapable, but she was just getting shut in. And this is what happens to everybody who is also a person with disabilities, not just the elderly, but if you're on a wheelchair, the person couldn't cross the road. If you're in, you are hearing impaired, you can't hear the signals. And if you're blind, I see blind people walking around in our crazy, traffic in India. And I'm like, it freaks us out when we are fully, we have all our visual and other capabilities. Imagine going blindfold into any of our urban traffic and having to navigate it completely blind. So people with disability have learned to accept it because this is the world they are in. It denies them so many opportunities that the able population like you and I just take for granted. We can go to a restaurant, we don't have to think about it. We go to a theater, we can go to a park. And if there's a barrier, we hop over it or we climb up or we go up those stairs. Whereas for those with disability, every day is like a, parkour course. It's like an obstacle course just to get to work and back. What this results in, unfortunately, is a survey we did recently. A large number of people drop out of school because they can't get to school and back. The buses are not accessible. When they get to the school is not accessible. And even somebody as distinguished as, the former Chief Justice, D.Y. Chandrachud, was telling a story about his 2 special needs kids. One of them wanted to study chemistry or the sciences and went to her dad and said, I want to do this. And he said, great, whatever you want to do, you should go for it. And she said, I can't do it. And he said, why? Because the chemistry lab in the school was on a different floor and there was no lift in the school. So we found a large number of people who get into jobs, drop out of jobs because the buildings are not accessible. Getting there is a challenge. There are no accessible loos, so you got to hold it from 7 in the morning when you leave till you get back home. So there are a lot of simple things that we are thoughtless about. We're not mindful of little things that we could have done to create a more inclusive India where all these people could participate with us. When you go abroad, you see a lot of people with disability, going around on their own, traversing places, going to plays, all on their own. And that independence and that dignity and self worth that comes with it is denied to people in India.
Absolutely. Let me flip the situation around on its head. What if public spaces were accessible? How would the life of a person with disability alter? And also, what would the economic benefit of that be to the GDP or the economy?
The ability for a person with disability to go where they want without always having a caregiver going with them to help them navigate India is something that makes them always dependent. So imagine if you always had to be chaperoned around by somebody and you couldn't go to a coffee shop when you felt like, you couldn't go to work when you felt like. Everything had to be thought through, had to be planned, and then had to have somebody with you. Now, when you're very poor, what happens with uh, if you're a person with disability and you need a caregiver? Many cases, the caregiver is a daily wage earner. They lose their wages as well. So even to go and get my disability pension, I have to traverse with somebody, go there to collect my pension. But that means the other person's losing a whole day's wage, sometimes 2 days if it's, travel to a remote district office, etc. So in so many ways, these are little, costs and penalties being placed on. Now people will tell me, oh, but somebody can take, oh, Uber has an accessible taxi. And sure they do, but how many people with disability can actually afford to take an Uber every time they need to go somewhere, even to their nearest grocery store? They need to take an Uber. So people say these things, well intentioned, but quite thoughtless about the challenge that it faces. Now, is there an economic rationale for it? Well, first of all, there's an equity and a justice rationale, right? 75 years ago, we said, we, the people of India, give ourselves blah, blah, blah. But somehow we seem to have forgotten that definition of we, the people, seems to have excluded those who are disabled, those who have various forms of, other challenges. And we seem to have defined the republic as equal rights only for those with uh, full abilities. So there is an equity principle to it, a justice principle to it. But even when it comes to economics, I was telling somebody a little story about a time when I ran a very large retail business. Now, when we built our stores, we never thought about, accessibility. We wanted the best frontage, we wanted the best location, we wanted the best interiors, etc. Now, there is a tradition in India where when you're buying your wedding trousseau, you actually, generations of people come. Your mother comes with you, your grandmother comes, and it's like a big family occasion. Now, what was not something we were aware of was that if the grandmother couldn't climb those steps, sometimes 7, 8 steps, grand entrance, lovely staircase, but no ramp, no way of getting in and out, no lift inside to go up to the mezzanine floor, they would probably go to a place where they could get grandma into the city. Now, that would never get caught on any brand or market research survey because who would think about asking that? We would have asked about pricing, product, advertising, blah, blah, blah. But then there was a simple thing like this. Or let's say you go out for a family dinner, you know, you want to take your parents out, then you got your kids. It's a big meal. It's a big ticket meal. Either you'll go where the kids want, but if you have an elderly parent who can't actually climb or has some disability or other, then you will go where the grandparents can manage to navigate, right? So all these are economic costs that often are not captured, that businesses are losing, money on because they're not sensitized to it.
Is India doing better on this front than a few years ago? Is there any progress at all?
So I think for the first time, somebody at the head of the nation flagged this issue. So in 2016, the Honorable Prime Minister announced the Accessible India campaign or the Sugamya Bharat Abhiyan. And to give credit to the central government, all the new buildings that are coming up in Delhi are supposedly going to be accessible. The new Parliament building is accessible. Even the Ram Mandir is largely accessible. They are making an effort to actually make buildings comply with accessibility codes. All the central government websites have been mandated and actually have been audited to be accessible. Now, contrast this with our perception of government usually being the last one, a laggard in making progress. But in this particular instance, in terms of accessibility, the central government has set a new standard, which we are now trying to encourage through the Yes to Access campaign. The private sector, which of course is 90%, and state governments, which is where actually the ordinary person with disability is likely to meet. It's your panchayat office, it's your disability pension office, your corporation office where you actually go. No one goes to Delhi to meet Mr. Modi or the central minister. So have we made some progress? Yes. There have been after the Chief Justice, the former Chief Justice, being on the bench, a greater sensitization amongst the judiciary. Recently, a High Court slammed a ride-hailing app because it was not accessible and therefore discriminatory towards persons with disability, and they were actually ordered to make their apps accessible. So, have things progressed in terms of awareness? Yes, marginally, certainly at the government level. But since 2016, the momentum behind the Sugamiya Bharat Abhiyan actually, tapered down, declined. Even the monies allocated were declining. However, the good news is that the central government has now announced Sugamiya Bharat 2.0. And that hopes to revive the campaign. And as you mentioned in the introduction, they're actually collaborating with us using an app that we've developed to actually audit public spaces. And their hope is that they will start with doing the top 20 most visited locations in every state and go from there.
Are there any immediate steps that you think urban spaces, cities can do to make urban spaces more accessible?
There are often very small changes that need to be made. If you look at a newly laid footpath in the country, it's about 6 to 8 inches off the road, the curb height. Now, what we often forget is just to give a little slope so that somebody can take their wheelchair up on it. So that bit is forgotten, or it's like 1 kilometer away, and there's no way that person can go there. Ramps are such an obvious thing. Put a ramp with some railings. It at least helps the person get into the building where somebody can be assisted. So, a large part of this, what we discover when we are talking to people, is just a lack of awareness and sensitization. The minute people kind of get it, they're like, oh, okay, that's easy to do. But in many cases, because the disabled are not visible, there's no share of mind, and therefore people just don't think about it. So I'm optimistic. When we started this Yes to Access campaign, it seemed like, one of those Don Quixote things to try and change accessibility across India. But my view was, once we start, there are good people everywhere. And these changes that we are asking people to make are small changes that if somebody was aware, they would have made it themselves. Now that we are making them aware, hopefully they will start to make those changes and India will get better progressively. It's going to be a long journey, but at least we've got started, and hopefully we will make a more equal and inclusive India going forward.
Yes, I also wanted to make the point that it's not just spaces, but also modes of transportation that need to adopt all of these measures that you mentioned.
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, 90% of persons with disability, the disabled are one community which are at the bottom of so many social and economic metrics. Less than 10% of children with special needs graduate schools. So you know what that means towards later employment, etc. Less than 30% of people actually hold even regular jobs. The actual number who have good paid jobs are probably in the 15-20%. And all of them, therefore, consequently depend on public transport. Now, the good news is our airports are largely accessible, and certainly the newer ones are more sensitive about it. But when you come down to daily travel, which is by our buses, bus stands, our central bus stands, etc., it's still a long way to go. The good thing is the new bus standards are trying to make it more accessible. The railways have had a consultative paper on how to make railway stations more accessible. I don't know when was the last time you went by train, but if you remember, uh, in some stations, there is a vertical step up that you have to climb up to get into the sleeper compartment. Now, how you will get somebody up there and in that remains a challenge. There are lots of ideas around. I think implementation and execution is where we now need to push. So there is a growing awareness and a growing consensus that something has to be done. The really good thing is I haven't met a single person who says, no, we won't do it. Nor has somebody said, no, we shouldn't be doing it. Everybody agrees, oh yeah, we should do something. We just never thought about it. Now, as with everything in India, it's always the execution. Okay, what's the pace at which we can do this? And how quickly will people adopt this as a sign that, hey, we are a better company, we are a better brand. We want everybody to come into our stores, as an example, or to come and eat with us and, become known for that as a brand value, as opposed to just the other more traditional brand uh, attributes.
Since you're speaking of companies and brands, is there a role the corporate sector can play in making urban spaces more accessible? And what is, in a complementary way, what is the role that the development sector can play along with the corporate sector?
I must tell you what I thought was one of the most ironic situations that I have been in. You may be aware that there is a whole side of Bangalore where all the global capability centers or the GCCs are set up. And these centers are built to global standards. So most of them are accessible by design. And, living inside that, you are living in a quasi first world environment. When you step out, of course, reality hits you with all the garbage and bad roads, crazy traffic. So at one of the GCCs, somebody was showing me how they had a demo of what they were doing in Seoul, Korea, where the entire traffic management system was being managed by this company, and everything in Seoul, was working off their tech. And I just looked at the guy and said, but every day you drive through this crazy chaos outside. Why would you do something just outside your gate? Okay. Just outside your gate. And he said, "Oh well, there are a lot of reasons. It's a big challenge to cooperate with the municipality. They don't want to welcome technology, etc., etc." But I think it's uh, partly because corporates believe that that's not their role. We pay taxes, uh, and it's the government's role to do that. It's also the reason we often joke, not joke, we kind of say that we keep our houses clean and we toss the garbage out onto the road. Our houses are global standards of cleanliness and hygiene, mopped, swept, wiped, but we think nothing about tossing it outside. So the sense of community, the sense that, I should do something for my community is still, I would say, something that we haven't fully acknowledged. If at all people do something on their street, but they don't really see what they're doing. Now, on the flip side, they say, look, we've got quarters to make, we've got budgets to meet, we've got shareholders, and doing good is not necessarily our primary role. We can facilitate, but if it's too hard, then it's not what we do. Now, I've been on that side of the fence in my earlier life, so I kind of appreciate the challenges people work in. But I think the way traffic in Bangalore is always a talking point, and the fact that we can solve so many problems globally using our technology, but very little of it in our own country, is something I would ask corporate leaders to kind of reflect on. Bring your own capabilities and your talents to make India better for ordinary Indians who can never aspire to work in your GCCs. So for the 100,000, 200,000, 400,000 people working in those things, sure, you give them a a workplace and standard of living that is globally great. But for the 99% of Indians, hey, you should do something about it. Now, the development sector, everything nobody wants to do, which is the government has a lacunae delivering services, the corporates are too busy doing it. They expect the development sector to do it. There are thousands of, NGOs working really hard to try and bridge the gap between what citizens need and deserve and what is being delivered both by the private sector and the public sector. But some of these things require, all citizens of India. So, when we designed this campaign, we came up with this recognition that, hey, the NGOs can't do this. Person with disability can't do it. We've been working in disability for 6.5 decades. Okay, that's a heck of a long time. And we said we have to have the humility to say, okay, we can't solve this problem. And we, by design in this campaign, said we have to motivate the able population to feel that, hey, they can do something for their less able brothers and sisters, and that there are good people everywhere, and that if they are made aware, sensitized, and motivated, people will come forward and do it. And what we are seeing today, even though it's the early stages of the campaign, is a validation of that. We have lots of young people who want to do something beyond work and earning money. We have lots of old people who say, oh, I don't know what to do. I want to do something, but I don't know what to do, or stepping forward and doing it. And we've made it easier for them to do it. So I'm hopeful that we can all get off WhatsApp forwards and fighting over things that divide us and come together for a cause like this and many other causes to actually unite to see what can we do with it to make India better.
Do you think some of these problems can be resolved through greater political representation of the disabled, for example, through reserved seats?
I think for just to remind people that, yeah, there's a whole community of people. You referred to the statistics. Since 2011, the persons with disability haven't been counted. Okay. And we went from 6 types of disability that were poorly counted because a lot of Indians, because of stigma, etc., underreport. Okay. Because they don't want to say someone's got a mental illness or has a disability in the family, because what it might, the stigma that might get attached to other members of the family. But we went from 6 to 21 types, and we haven't been counted since 2011. And even in developed countries, the ratio of people who are considered disabled is much higher than India, even those with much better healthcare systems. Add to that the elderly. Okay. The elderly is now the fastest growing demographic in India. And the bad news for everyone listening in is that you will, as you age, acquire one or many forms of disability. And you would have seen it in your grandparents or your parents. As they get older, above 65 years, almost 40% have some form of disability, and then it kind of grows exponentially from there, depending on how you live. So it's a large mass of people. It's not just those who acquire disabilities are born with it, but also those who are aging and elderly. So can all these people be, can society be created to give all these people a fair chance to live a dignified, independent life? That's, I think, the task.
Tell us about the Department for Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities Accessible India campaign, and how is the APD partnering with it?
So let me first talk about how we went about trying to solve this accessibility thing. So first, we acknowledge that NGOs can't do it. We can't do it. NGOs can't do it. Just persons with disability can't do it. So the way the government has recommended accessibility audits should be done is you get a group of persons with disability together. They go to a building. They, go through a 300 odd point checklist. They write a report. They present the report. And I'm sure what happens in many cases is it goes into somebody's good intentions drawer. Okay. Yeah, it's a good thing to do. But I'm at quarter ending and this, I'll look into it. So we also discovered there just aren't enough people who are trained accessibility auditors. And this process just takes forever. And the analogy we took in designing this and flipping the idea of an expert auditor around was if you are if you're a foodie and you're into looking at where to go and eat, you will see that there are two different ways in which restaurants are graded. One is the Michelin guide, where an expert goes to a place and grades it on a whole set of things. The other is you and me on Swiggy or Zomato, right? Or TripAdvisor, where we are crowdsourcing this information. Now, the challenge with the Michelin system, while it's certainly of a much higher order of valuation, is that they can only do 500 to 1,000 restaurants globally. Swiggy and Zomato have thousands of restaurants, maybe in every city, who get graded by people who go there. So we said, for a problem as vast as this, we need to look at how we can crowdsource this information. But then every layperson is going to say, hey, I don't know anything about accessibility. I'm not an expert. So we said, what would happen if you took the expertise of an auditor and built it into an app? So using some cutting edge camera vision and AI capabilities, funded by a very reputed donor, we actually built this app that now requires a person to only take the app, open it when you go out to eat or you're going out somewhere, just take it out, take a few pictures. Okay, there's a little guided walk from the outside to the inside. Take a few pictures. It gets uploaded to the cloud. Over there, it gets graded for accessibility. Okay, so there's no, you and I don't give different ratings for the same thing because tech is doing it. And very importantly, it then places this information onto a layer of a Google map. So what does that do? That tells you when you're a person with disability or a caregiver, what are the places which are accessible and not accessible or partially accessible. When you're planning to go there, you know before you get there, what is the barrier you're going to face. So as I always say, if you drank a lot of water and went for your court hearing and then found that you wanted to stay hydrated, it's a hot day. Then when you're at the court, you find that there's no accessible toilet there. Okay. Or you go out for a meal with your friends and you find that the person can't get into the restaurant. So the information that volunteers are crowdsourcing gets put on the app. And then caregivers, elderly, persons with disability, or you're taking your grandfather out, you can check what am I going to face when I get there so that you can all pick this. And over time, we are hoping that that information with those scores will create some social pressure for change and also address your question earlier. It'll drive brand or location choice and thereby giving it a commercial angle as well. So that's the idea. Now, what happened with the department? The department saw this app when it was launched. They were there present and they were facing a challenge that they had funded many locations where those locations were supposed to have been made accessible. So many of the national skilling centers, various temples, etc., etc. They had given money to make them accessible. But there was no evidence that that had been done. When they asked, okay, tell us, have you done it? Everybody said yes, but there was no evidence for it. So they're now using the app to actually audit places that they felt should be accessible. And we can now provide them access because we can by organization that's auditing it, if you enter a coupon code, then we can sort by that and they can actually see their view of the places that they wanted audited and what's the actual state on condition of it. So that's the reason they signed an MOU with us. It was timely because Sugamya Bharat 2.0 was being kicked off by the minister. And we are hoping now that in collaboration with them, but also, as I said, with large numbers of volunteer citizens, corporates, and colleges, and just ordinary people, we could build this in an organic manner.
What has been the uptake so far? How much is it being used or how much has it been downloaded?
Yeah. So here's something you should know, right? Most startups spend hundreds of crores of money just getting the app downloaded and then persuading people to use it. So from early on, we knew that creating the app is not the end of the people have to download it. And so since it was a pilot, we had a goal of 10,000 places, buildings, and locations that we hoped we could audit over a period of, we said 3 years. Okay, nobody had any idea, so we just said, okay, 10,000. Fortunately, we had a kind donor who said, okay, yeah, 10,000 is a good starting number. It's 10,000 buildings. That's a great number to start with. What I'm happy to say is in the 3 months the app has been live, we are now at 12,000 audits. So what we thought we'd do in 3 years, we've shot past it in 3 months. Over 5,500 auditors have come on board. And we've still not reached out to, the large corporates and stuff who have large corporate volunteering requirements to persuade them to actually use this because you can use it anytime. You can do it in a group activity. You can do it as a standalone. We can give you data. It's measurable. And you're creating a digital public good. Okay. It's not like going to some place and painting a school wall. Okay. It's nice to do, but uh, those are the kind of volunteering requests we often get. Can our guys come and paint your wall? No, we don't. Our wall's pretty good already. So now we have something tangible to give them and the data is now available to all Indians to start to use. And over time, we hope it'll, populate virally and organically. And we will have an India that where people are beginning to become aware, oh, I'm a great place to work. I'm a top brand in the country. I'm a very successful this thing, but hey, I'm getting a two on all my outlets or my stores in terms of accessibility. And we're hoping that the voices of customers will be heard. An NGO writing to a corporate, oh, yeah, okay, well, nice. You guys are just idealistic, impractical guys. We have businesses to run. But when paying customers write to them and say, hey, I couldn't take my granddad to your place, make it accessible, or I want to be part of a brand or a community that is more inclusive, we think companies will listen, and that's the hope.
Just staying with the government for a second, are there any further policy changes that you recommend at this time?
I think, in India, we've always said we've got great laws, we just don't implement them. So I think the government now just starts to lean on people saying that, why should it be the responsibility of an NGO or a person with disability who's already facing so many challenges in life to fight for this cause and make it justiciable. Okay, so we're now trying to see how we can work upstream on it. So we've got a group working on a curriculum because I told you no one learns about this. Even architects don't learn about accessibility. So why do our buildings not accessible? Because it's not even there in the curriculum. Our triple ITs and our computer science programs don't teach digital accessibility. So we're working upstream on that. We're trying to see if we can get to UGC, where UGC could say through NAC, the National Academic Accreditation Council, that accessibility is one of the things you have to have for you to get a high score. So there are many enabling ways that we are hoping to do collaboratively rather than through the courts to nudge people to move forward. Many ministries have put out consultation papers. We've all responded to them. Now it's a question of persuading those ministers and ministries to move forward. The good thing is this is a campaign that Prime Minister Modi himself kicked off. At some point, we hope he will refocus on it and drive this. And that once he makes it a priority, as he did in 2016, if in 2025 we can reignite it, you will find a lot of compliance now becoming part of it. So SEBI could make it part of an ESG standard. So, when you say social, the social part of ESG, obviously it must include all of these things, right? Equality of access, equality of opportunity. We talk about DEI, it's a bad word in America, but in the rest of the world, we need to move DEI beyond gender to include these marginalized groups like the disabled. I think on gender, at least people don't argue about it. Compliance is improving, but now no one says, "Oh, why should I have a woman? Why should I give them a fair shake, etc." At least they agree, even if they may not do it 100%. But disability and the disabled, not even on the agenda. No one's even thought of them. And because they're largely missing from sight, I think that further accentuates the problem. If India was accessible, okay, every day I see our people, our employees with disability going about their work. I'm always like, my God, we guys sit and crib about so many things. These people do this every single day and they're still smiling and they're still so positive. So I think if we could see more of them, I think India would more rapidly become sensitized and change would happen. But at the end, it takes all of it. It takes all three legs: the bureaucracy to push some of these things, the executive to do it. And certainly, I think if we had a few lawmakers who are disabled, persons with disability, those voices would be heard where at the highest levels of, lawmaking in India.
So here's a question I ask all my guests at the end of the show. Why do you do this work?
Because for me, when I shifted from many years in corporate life, what people do after retirement is they do angel investing, mentoring, coaching, board seats, all this stuff. And I was fortunate that I had done a lot of that during the course of my career, and none of it had kind of a lure for me later. What actually turns me on is really trying to find a big problem that doesn't seem to have a solution and trying to figure out, okay, how can we solve this? Now, we may not be able to solve it in its entirety in my lifetime, but certainly it's a big problem, and that's what actually keeps me going. Besides the fact that, a lot of what I learned through the course of my life is applicable here. So we're growing, we're scaling, we have to raise money every year. Much of this is what I tell people who are spending all their time post retirement doing these other very valuable things like angel investing or mentoring, coaching, saying, "Hey guys, why don't you come here and do something?" The problems are really complex. There's an acute shortage of talent. We can never hope to hire the kind of people who we routinely hired in corporate life. But if you had some time, we can give you something for you to be fulfilled. And I must say, God has been kind and given me a reasonably successful career, corporate career. But there is nothing that even comes close to the gratification that one gets when you go back home from solving this. Because here, you're really making a huge difference in some one individual's life. And if not APD, really there isn't any other alternative for the person. Whereas in prior jobs, if you didn't have this watch, somebody else you could buy another watch, or you didn't go to this jewelry store, there was some other else, some other restaurant you could go to. But in most of what we do, we are the only people there for these people. And if we are not there, they have nothing. So that also gives you a sense of purpose and a sense of value. And I wish if there are people who are wondering what they want to do, they should reach out to us. We can find something for you to do. Don't say you don't know the social sector. We're all social animals. And the social sector is just a group of people trying to do the best they can for a group of other people who need that help. And every single person can do something to help in some way or the other. So I would encourage people to come on board, participate, volunteer, teach, train, assist. There are a million ways you can be helpful.
Jacob, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Ashraf. And the Yes to Access app is on iOS and the Google Play Store. It works for the basic Android phone all the way up to your fancy Apple phone. Please go to the store, download it, try it out, write to us, become a participant in building a more inclusive and a more accessible India. Thank you, Ashraf.
All Indians matter.